So in this segment, we're going to be talking about the key changes the government are making to the Northern Ireland Protocol. So this won't be as long as the other video I've made. I want to try and get this out on the 14th. There are four major changes the government have made, which is the Customs Green Channel. So the effect of the Northern Ireland Protocol is to create a customs border in the RSC with the goods exported from Great Britain to Northern Ireland facing checks, even if they are not destined for the Republic of Ireland or elsewhere in the EU. Now, this is a big change, especially from the EU's proposal of an express lane, because the express lane is there for goods not at risk of going into the Republic of Ireland. Under these changes, it's going to assume that the exporter, the one moving the goods between GB and NI, is telling the truth that the goods are going to stay in Northern Ireland, and there's no actual way of verifying if the checks are staying in Northern Ireland. The government have talked about, they will allow the use of real-time data flows, but we don't know if that's going to happen because the UK government haven't even managed to get those systems operational not properly. So if we look here, Marks and Spencers have complained about the bureaucracy because the guy in charge is not the brightest, honestly, saying it's added 24 hours to the time required to move food products from GB to NI, shortening lifespan, etc. So obviously it's an issue for people moving goods between GB and NI, and the question I would ask the Marks and Spencer chief is, why are you still doing that? Why haven't you managed to sort your supply chains out? You're a big company. The bill will change that by creating a green channel for goods leaving Great Britain that will remain in Northern Ireland. Again, given that Marks and Spencers operates within the Republic of Ireland, how will you guarantee that those goods going to Northern Ireland won't be moved on into the Republic of Ireland? How are you going to guarantee that? The Foreign Secretary Liz Truss had previously suggested this will be enforced using a trusted trader scheme. The problems, as I've mentioned numerous times about the trusted trader scheme, is that when it was proposed originally, the UK and the EU came up with the businesses that would be on the trusted trader scheme. Then do you know what happened? The UK started unilaterally changing the trusted trader scheme and then tried to say all businesses in GB will be classed as trusted traders. That's the reason why the trusted trader scheme didn't work. And the use of real-time data flows of goods. Are you going to show the EU the real-time data flows of goods? Because you haven't so far. So this is not a million miles away from the express lane the EU have proposed. Checks would continue for exports heading beyond Northern Ireland, going to the Republic, and they would have to pass through a red lane, essentially. The problem is the EU want goods at risk of going into the Republic of Ireland to be checked, not goods that are going to move on, because otherwise it just incentivizes companies to lie, especially when there's no actual enforcement mechanism. So it's not a million miles away from what the EU wanted, but the express lane is still different from a green lane. There's still paperwork, it's just minimal, and it's backed up by real-time data. So again, that first one is pretty bad. It gets worse. This one, I think, the dual regulation is the worst one, in my opinion. Businesses putting their products up for sale within Northern Ireland will be given the choice of doing so under UK or EU rules. So effectively, it means that goods that aren't made up to EU standards can be, pushed into the single market with no problem. The government says this is to ensure Northern Ireland's consumers can continue to buy goods under the UK if they choose to do so. But the problem is the UK, unless we're going to deregulate, there's no reason to have this. For the most part, there's no reason to do this unless we're going to deregulate. Truss called this a dual regulatory system that encompasses either EU or UK regulations. That one's a major problem for certain farmers who use British goods as imports for their farming products. That one's a big problem in itself because, what if, we start deregulating, we allow pesticides to be used, which, EU banned pesticides, which we're already using, by the way, some of them. If Northern Ireland farmers start using EU banned pesticides because they're allowed to under UK laws, then they export, say the milk from those cows into the Republic of Ireland where they're processed. There you have products that aren't up to EU standards just flowing freely into the single market. That's a problem. Products rules are likely to diverge over time. The EU has begun working towards a universal charger for mobile phones, for example, which is, credit to them because, your lightning cable sucks. Apple sucks. The UK government has suggested it is unlikely to follow suit, and that's where you create a key problem. Most likely, what's going to happen is, I can't imagine. Well, to be fair, there is already kind of a separate supply line for British goods, anyways. because British plugs are different to European plugs. So I suppose they could still have the lightning cable in those phones, for example. So that wouldn't be too hard for Apple to do. But then again, they've stopped selling the plugs with the phones now. You don't even get a charger anymore because companies suck. But I digress. Tax and state aid. This one's another one which will cause fundamental problems. EU tax laws recently prevented the Chancellor Sunak from implementing a recent VAT cut on energy-saving materials in Northern Ireland. That one, the VAT stuff, I'm sure they can come up with an agreement on that one. Whilst maybe they can create a minimum, an absolute minimum the UK can't go below. While state aid rules limit taxpayer subsidies, that makes sense because effectively Northern Ireland is competing with EU countries because it can export freely into the EU single market for goods. So therefore, subsidies are an issue. That's constrained the use of the COVID recovery schemes during the pandemic. And again, that's another one where you could have gone to the Joint Committee and spoke to them about the issues and got some resolution, but the British government decided not to do that. If the bill is passed, it will allow ministers to override these restrictions. State bailouts within Northern Ireland would be governed under UK post-Brexit legislation, the Subsidy Control Act 2022. It's not a bill I'm familiar with, or an act, should I say. While ministers would be handed the power to set VAT, excise rates and tax relief in Northern Ireland. So effectively, they would be able to rule over Northern Ireland fiscal policies just like they do over Great Britain. And that's obviously a key problem because of competition rules. Especially since the UK has already been taken over to the WTO over the certain alleged breaches over the construction of wind turbines. Because apparently we're favouring companies that are going to use British made parts over other countries unfairly. In the briefing, a note published alongside the bill, the government says the legislation will provide freedoms for ministers to adapt or disapply rules so that people in Northern Ireland can benefit from the same policies as elsewhere. But, you cut Northern Ireland out when you signed up to the protocol. That's a key problem. And also the fact that, will these ministers be held liable for the breaches of international law? Because this legislation allows them to breach the protocol, but will the individual ministers who use these powers be held liable? That's going to be an interesting question. Carving out the European Court of Justice, this one's another egregious one, which I didn't think was as bad as, the more reading I did, the more I realised it's bad, because at the end of the day, the European Court of Justice sees itself as the ultimate arbitrator in dealing with issues regarding the single market. What the UK is doing by cutting out the European Court of Justice, saying, no, you're not the top dog in dealing with disputes in the single market, you're going to give it to some independent arbitrators that we haven't actually listed yet. This was long demanded by the ERG, so you can see why Liz Truss had this included. And again, will Liz Truss face some sort of sanctions for being the one to push a bill that breaks international law? I don't know. The bill is aimed at removing the role of the European Court of Justice in resolving disputes between the UK and the EU over the interpretation of the protocol. In the document, the government argues there's a democratic deficit as rules are made and imposed on Northern Ireland without ongoing democratic consent. But, the October proposals tries to deal with the democratic deficit. Northern Ireland would be, spoken to and allowed in meetings around where certain EU laws that will impact them. So that's a load of rubbish, especially when, the DUP, really, the Stormont, should I say, really doesn't have a ton of say over the way laws are made in Westminster anyways. None of the devolved governments do, so this is ridiculous to argue there's a democratic deficit, because the real democratic deficit exists within Westminster, not within Stormont or the protocol. It says that under the legislation, the ECJ would no longer arbitrate its disputes over the application of the protocol, and these would instead be dealt with by unspecified ordinary international dispute settlement mechanisms with balanced involvement by both sides. I mean, that's a load of jargon and nonsense, and we don't know who these people are going to be. I don't think it sets out in the bill either. Is it going to be the WTO that settles things? Who are these arbitrators? What do they look like? What are their credentials, etc.? Who's going to choose them? Does the UK choose half? Does the EU choose half? How is this going to work? It makes no sense. And, future issues. While the bill is focused on aspects of the protocol the government already considers to be problematic, it also allows ministers to override other elements in future in the case of economic or political disruption, which, that can arise from a lot of things. The DUP are causing political disruption right now. The government insists Clause 15 is narrowly drafted. This is the bit that allows them to deal with stuff in the future. But yeah, not great. It is also expected to be made clear that the clause will not be applicable to crucial aspects of the regime in Northern Ireland, including the common travel area, which, Priti Patel's already made the carbon travel area a bit worse by penalising people that aren't from Ireland who want to use the common travel area. But again, how do you know if someone's not Irish unless you check a passport? And you know exactly the type of people they'll target mostly. However, it has raised fears that the government is effectively giving itself the right to disregard the protocol at the whims of ministers, and effectively means that at any moment, using this legislation, the UK ministers can just get rid of bits of the protocol without any scrutiny. This effectively gives the executive and ministers way too much power because they can do things without scrutiny and no one will be able to hold them accountable for it because they will try and ignore the rulings of the European Court of Justice, because they'll argue that under this legislation the European Court of Justice has no power here. It has to go through arbitration. It's not listed how long arbitration could take, who the arbitrators are, how long they have to get a list, etc. So if they say in the bill, for example, it takes 5 years to go through arbitration, these ministers will be long gone by then. A lot of them would be anyways. But yeah, this is a really, really good article by Heather Stewart, so massive credit to her for writing this in such a way that even I can understand it. Here you have basically the 4 or 5 key points of the protocol changes. As always, the article will be listed below because I actually believe in giving people credit when they actually do write up stuff, even if it's bad work, but in this case it's great. Who this guy is wearing a mask in the thumbnail, I have no idea, but anyways, remember to like the video, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can. I recommend just giving this article a read. It's pretty decent, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.